Well, that was a nice, uplifting little film to end our season with, wouldn't you say? Oh, it was so sweet and touching. Why don't you go ahead and introduce our
Sure,
our
please
guests.
join me in welcoming director Jesse Moss.
Welcome to Jesse Moss, who also produced the William Kunstler documentary, kind of a biopic that was made by Sarah and Emily Kunstler, his daughters, Disturbing the Universe. Now, we talked briefly before the program, you and I, about the genesis of this kind of film, and if you could include in that the following, which is how this idea, percolates for you, and then at what point do you decide to actively seek funding, and how do you do it to go start shooting?
I'm still looking for funding. I couldn't find any. There were some stories coming out of North Dakota that something extraordinary was happening, and it had become this bright spot in America in the wake of the recession, and people were flocking there to find work. And stories were coming out about this frontier boom town of Williston, and that intrigued me. And I didn't feel like there were any stories about what the ground level reality was like, and that intrigued me as well. And so I started to look around and actually came across an article, a clergy column that Pastor Jay had written in the local paper, the Williston Herald. And I read it, and in that column, Jay called on his community to welcome these newcomers. And I knew that that was an unusual sentiment because of the murder of Sherry Arnold. And I called Jay, and we talked on the phone. He was really friendly. Actually, he called me back. I left him a message, and he said, "You got to come to my church. There are men and women sleeping here on the floor." And I said, "Okay." And that was the invitation that I needed. And I went up there by myself with a camera, and that's how I shot the film. And actually, when I got there, I asked Jay if I could stay in the church, and because I needed a place to stay. It's very hard, as you can see, to find housing or hotels, actually, because they're all rented out to oil companies. And Jay allowed me to sleep at the church, and that was the genesis of the film. But I will say, the moment I set foot in the church and saw Jay's interactions with these overnighters, it was electrifying, and I started filming almost immediately. Jay welcomed me into that place, and I think he felt like it was a story that should be told.
How long did you spend in the church? And
I slept in the church.
Sleeping in the church,
I slept for 6 months, and then I found better, well, I would say not better, but different, slightly better accommodations. It was a hard 6 months, but a very important 6 months in the film because the film is obviously, it's very intimate and very personal, and I think it rests on that foundation of that relationship that was built in that initial period, and that decision to go alone without a crew, and really just to be there and present and available for Jay and for the men that I met.
I don't really wear glasses, but I thought for tonight I would just make this very consistent here on this. Pardon me, but this brought to mind, I mean, for those people who crave documentaries, good documentaries the way I do, this reminded me somewhat of, in one aspect, of American Family, the famous PBS documentary about the Loud family. Many people here might remember that from the 70s, in which they, documentarians, induced this family, for those who don't know it, to allow a film crew to come and film this family. I was outside of San Francisco, I think, and they were in, where were they?
San Luis Obispo, or maybe Southern
okay,
California.
we'll look that up.
Santa Barbara. Close.
Thank you. We'll Google that. But for everybody, raise your hands if you remember American Family. So American Family, and they put the cameras on, and the family comes apart. They just unravel right in front of them. All of a sudden, when you least expect them to kind of let their hair down, they do a lot more than let their hair down, and the whole family comes, shatters right in front of you, the husband, the wife, the marriage, everything. But it was interesting. Did you find when you arrived, this guy seemed like, it was almost like, we talked about this as well at the cocktail party, that this guy was almost waiting for you to show up.
I think he was waiting for the overnighters to show up, and then I think he was waiting for me. I think it's both. I think that there was and this was clear from the beginning, from when I met him, and became clearer, but that there was almost a recklessness to his embrace of the overnighters, and he had crossed, or he had seen an opportunity to do something very meaningful for himself and for these people. But it required him to cross this threshold, and I could see that there was no recovery from that for him, that he had alienated his congregation beyond repair. Even in that early time of filming, it was just like he had decided he had to do this. And I think that when I arrived, because he had so little support for what he was doing, I think the fact that I did believe in the rightness of his cause, and I told him that in different ways. I mean, I told him that by being there and documenting it, because I thought it was an important story. But I think,
what about it did you believe?
Well,
what about his quote? When you say the rightness of his quote, specifically, what do you mean?
I think, and I came to this not as someone who grew up in the church, and I didn't see it in explicitly Christian terms. I saw it as a really profoundly moral act on Jay's part to help people who needed help, despite the cost that he bore in his life. And that struck me, and I could relate to that even from my very different background. And for Jay, it was an expression of his faith and the Christian ethic lived to truly love his neighbor. But it also,
it turns out Jay really was loving his neighbor.
Well, I think, so there are complexities to Jay, and those were actually very visible as well. That it was, and he admitted to me early on that he said to me, no one has pure motives. And I thought, okay, I like this guy because he's willing to admit his humanness, his vanity, his faults and failings. And I didn't know what all of those were, but he told me he had them. And I wondered, well, would he ever tell me? Would these things come out? I don't know, but there's a mystery to the man that was clear, beyond the sort of the faith expression that was, I thought, deep. There was something in him that I could see was compelling him.
What's the name of the guy who's in the van at the end, who then doesn't leave the keys?
That's Alan.
And when Alan's saying, I had faith in you, or I believed in you, and there's you when you're up there in front of the congregation, did you speak to him? There's a couple people, I'm assuming, there's more of them on film than you used in the final cut. And was Alan someone who kind of led you to believe that he was on to him for a while, that he knew?
I think
it was a miss with Jay?
I think that, Alan maybe experienced Jay's hypocrisy. They all experienced it differently, and in part, but also I think, and I do think this is true, that these guys came seeking something, and when they didn't find it or couldn't find it, or the burdens that they thought they could escape caught up with them, they turned against the person who became close to them, and for most of them, that was Jay. He was there. In some cases, he threw Paul out of his house. Paul's the other guy who goes to the newspaper, and I think Paul felt like, well, you told me you loved me, and then you tossed me out of my ear to bring in this other man, and you're
Which is one is Paul.
He's the guy who's sleeping on the street. He goes to the newspaper to kind of rat out.
Oh, right, but he's the one who's very wound up. Who's it? Okay.
He's a New Yorker.
Hey, settle down.
Paul.
I've seen this movie twice. No,
but
who's the guy that's? I'm bad with names.
Paul Engel.
I'm bad with names, Frank.
Yeah.
What's the guy's name who's all wound up and saying, who seems like he's on drugs?
That's Todd. He's
Todd.
Yeah, it's hard to keep.
I felt so
keep
sad
them all
for
straight
Todd.
and their problems. But
there's a high loser index in this movie.
I think it's one. And to respond to, I think what you're getting at, but maybe not saying, is that. The person who Jay had a relationship with, that he references at the end of the film, is not someone in the movie or someone that I filmed. It wasn't Paul or Alan or Michael or Keegan. So to answer that, if that's...
Well, what I meant, I make this crack, but what I meant is that many people come to this community, obviously. To me, when you analyze it on the simplest terms, people come to this community seeking a job. They want to work. The most touching moment for me is the African American guy who toward the end he says, age isn't going to be in your favor. And the guy just wears that look of like, damn. and I came all this way, and go workers are roused about or what have you. People that are just there looking for honest work, the work is gone, there's no place for them to stay. The whole thing is just maybe had turned into a bad idea for them, or they were unlucky. And then there's other people there who are just trouble. A lot of people, so when you say you believe in his idea, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, that you believe in his idea, which I do too, it seems that there has to be some counter in the community to what he's doing, because he has invited a lot of trouble into the community as well. Was that even sharper than you depict in the film? Were there more protests? Was there more anger? Were there more people? Was Jay really, really unpopular in that town?
He was, well, the mayor liked him, actually. The mayor came, and I think there were people who, at times, who did try to help Jay and support him. But there was much more opposition than I even depicted within the congregation, active opposition. And
why didn't you show that?
Because the congregation didn't want me to. And I thought the debate within the church was a meaningful and important conversation about what was the right way to live a good life, a Christian life, a moral life, and what is the role of a congregation. Like, this to me seems like an important question, and the congregation was fighting about it and arguing about it, and I wanted to film more of it. And they only let me film the fragments that you see, the one when the mediator comes in and tries to...
So sometimes you'll have a component in a film that might add another color or even partially balance the film to some extent, but those people don't want to be in your movie. They will deny you the right to put them in the film. Is that true?
Well, I think my job is to work hard to try to bring those voices into the film. And I think effectively with Shelley Schultz, the congregant who comes, and they have she, I think, speaks for many of us when she says, I don't like what they're doing to this place. I don't like what oil is doing to North Dakota. And she's a rational, I like her. She's sympathetic, and she articulates, I think, in a good way, in a strong way, what many of us would feel if this happened in our communities, if there was suddenly a shelter across the street from my house. So I had to work, it took me a year to get her to appear on camera. And so, I think I got what I needed. There were subtleties and shadings that, perhaps if you gave me another year to edit, I could have drawn out. But they really, they really, Jay stood out. He made himself a target, and he's a confrontational person, so they did hammer him down. But he as I said, there's a kind of recklessness to what he did.
He seems incredibly narcissistic.
He is. Look, he would be the first to admit that too, which I like about him. But
which is the sign of a true narcissist.
Who participates in?
The
decision to be in this documentary, and what she struggled with as a pastor. I think you're constantly having to sort of evaluate how much of this is about yourself, and because you're the one on stage. Well, it helps me that he's a natural performer, that he's used to being in front of an audience, and he didn't change. I don't think he changed in front of the camera. That is who he is. Not that he was never unaware of the camera's presence, but he has a kind of effortless charisma, a screen presence that drew me to him, and a spontaneity as a person that made him compelling. But I think there were complicated reasons for wanting to bring me into his life.
Well, I think that because I want to get to another point, I think that beyond screen presence, so to speak, which I agree with you, it's also, in his case, screen presence to me is one thing. Someone who can stand up and hold an audience's attention by the force of what they do or what they don't do. They don't push you away by, achieving certain levels of excess in their performance and so forth. So sometimes some of the most powerful screen presences withhold a great deal and summon the audience to them that way. And hopefully when the audience makes that journey, there's something waiting for them at the other end of it, like someone like Mitchum or someone who's very powerful on film, as one example, or De Niro. And but the thing about this guy is that I get from is his neediness. He just seems. Is he truly as needy off camera? He seemed like he was needy at the beginning and became remarkably so by the end of the film.
Yeah. Well, I think he did derive something necessary in him from being the provider to these overnighters. I think that the intimacy and the way in which they depended on him, and I don't mean that in a sinister way. I think that just provided, it sustained what he was doing, but it also did feed his. Yes.
No.
No. You know where I'm going with that, so you.
Sure. No, you finish.
No.
What I'm just suggesting before I get to this other thing is that in this way that we say in documentary films, or we believe, as I do in documentary films, and this isn't always the case, but sometimes, that the camera doesn't lie. Here's a man that you approach and he says, hey, you want to do a movie about me and my work? Sure, great. Come here, put a camera on me follow me into the bathroom. Follow me everywhere. Because I believe what I'm doing is important. I believe in myself. I believe I'm a good person. And eventually what he realized is, wow, the camera really doesn't lie. You're going to do a movie about me. You're going to find out about me. It's all going to come out. You do these films sometimes, and everything falls away, and they almost can't help but just expose themselves and say, for God's sakes, and now that you're asking me to discuss who I really am, I'll tell you who I really am. Sob, sob, sob. I've struggled with same-sex attraction all my life, and it just comes flying out of me. Did it seem that way to you?
Well, in a way, but it was 2 years of work to get to that place, right? I mean, it just didn't present itself like the moment I landed. I mean, so it all happened. It's chronological, right? I arrived to film at the end of the program after shooting for 18 months. I get off the plane. I go to the church. It's like literally the very last weekend that the church is going to function as the program. And Jay says to me, I'm about to lose my job. And so he says, it can't be in the film. Actually, that's what he doesn't say, you got to film this. He says, this cannot be in the film. It has nothing to do with the film. It has nothing to do with the program. And I said, well, first of all, tell me what happened. Why are you losing your job? And we proceeded to take a very long car ride without the camera so he could get a haircut in Montana. And he told me what was happening. And
is that a euphemism for something?
Yeah. That's...
Get a haircut.
That's
in
a North
Montana?
Dakota expression, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
But
write that down, honey. I want to go get a haircut in Montana.
no, I mean the way you describe it is partly true, but there was there is a lot of resistance, but I think.
How did you get him to agree? Because I want to get to something about the wife. Yeah. How did you get her to agree to film that moment?
Yeah. So.
How did she allow that?
First, the film is unscripted, right? Like they're not actors. It's not reality television. There's nothing outside of the interviews where I know what the course of events is going to be. So with that particular scene, Jay had not actually intended to have a conversation with her in a Economart, which seems to be where many intense scenes take place in this film. But there's not many options to go have a cup of coffee in Williston.
You and I should hang out there with a camera to see what happens.
There's a lot of life in that cafeteria, but so Jay, actually, if in the film he takes us on a tour of this kind of bombed-out looking church building. It's actually a power plant, but it looks like a church, and that's where he had planned to go and have this conversation. In private,
with her.
Without me, I should say.
With her,
without me. But they had a cup of coffee, and he couldn't help himself, it just sort of took its own course.
Or did he do it deliberately because you were there with the camera?
That's a question that I can't answer, and I'm not even sure Jay could answer it, but I think we can speculate.
Consider.
But they never asked me to stop filming because.
But did she ever turn to you after the fact? Once she doesn't know what's going to happen, he drops this on her. You're there with a camera. At any point, does she turn to you and say, "I don't want that in the movie"?
No, we could watch the dailies. They don't even know. They don't say that. They don't look at the camera. I mean.
She never asked you afterward.
So this all plays out. Okay, Jay makes public confession to his church, his congregation. The confession in the film is taken from that, his speech to his congregation. The church wouldn't allow me to film his confession. Jay was willing to let me film it. I couldn't.
So the voiceover while he's in the bombed-out power plant
is his public
is his public speech to the congregation?
That's correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, my
and
God.
So after this, that all happened very quickly, too. Like, those final moments happened... there was really no time to think. I just filmed, essentially. And then there was, after that, a very, very long 4-month conversation with Jay and Andrea and his family about this film, about those scenes, about Jay's confession, about whether or not it had a place in the film, and if so, why, and how did they feel about that? And that was that was for me. That was, I mean, not what I had signed up for, but where the position I found myself in, following this man whose life disintegrated in front of me. And so, what I certainly didn't ever want to do was do anything hurtful to Jay or his family. I had my intentions were to document this extraordinary program and what it told us about what was happening in North Dakota. And I found myself instead with this ending, but which I believe, and this is what we talked about, Jay's compassion for men who feel that they are broken and have stigma, it comes from deep within him. And I think that for me, what I felt, and the reason I felt that it belonged in the film, was that it unlocks him and our understanding of him as a human being. And when he says that he's broken, he really means it. And so, it was very hard for him and the family to see, but I believed was that they thought that this would entirely obscure the good that was present. And I said, I said the film is called The Overnighters, and Jay, yes, you are the main character of this story, but I think there's a powerful message at the center of this film, and that your willingness, your family's willingness to be this open, says a lot about you, and I think will not obscure what I think is really what this film is fundamentally about.
The marriage ended, or didn't?
What I would say about that is that Jay's life is unresolved in many ways.
Did you have a moment after the revelation with her? I mean, beyond a scene, which I wouldn't argue for, where she says, "Oh, I knew all along," or "Oh, I didn't know all along." Did you have any sense that what many people seem to be doing here is they'd spent a lot of time protecting public Jay?
Yeah.
That Jay incorporated, Jay as the minister of this church, Jay as a public figure, was something that they really, really believed in. And as is often the case with heroic or complex or poetic figures in public life, we cover up for them and support them. Was the wife signed on to that? Because the family is so supportive of him
I
in
would
private
say
sessions.
there are shades of gray there, for sure.
Yeah.
There's
Do you think she knew?
Yeah, in a way, yeah. I mean, Jay told me that he told his wife on their second date that he was attracted to men.
Right.
And I think, marriages are complicated and people are complicated. And this was at a time, when I think the church said, okay, because I think he told, people in the church, and they said, well, you can go to this program and they'll take care of that. And he's at a point in his life now where he knows that's not how things work.
So Jay's revelation, in the final act, obviously gives your film, putting the participants aside, it gives it a natural ending. I'm curious, you said you got as far as you did before this revelation happened. Did you have an ending in mind? Should this have not taken place?
I thought it was going to be the closure of the program. I mean, I thought at some point that maybe the program would just keep going, and that would be a bad ending, in a way, right? Or maybe not. Maybe it would have worked. But of course, I thought I need an ending. Maybe Jay will get fired. Actually, he told me that. I'll probably get fired. I'll probably lose my job because of this program. And so, I thought it would just be the yeah.
We're going to take some questions from the audience. Do we have our mics? Do you want to say something else?
I just wanted to thank the audience for coming. I know that Jaws was showing tonight too, and I really actually, I'm actually very grateful you came out to see this film, and thank you to Alec and David for this is such
Listen, this crowd is a discerning crowd. No one gets a haircut in Montana in Jaws. This crowd. We're going to let everybody filter out who's going to leave. Let's get our mics ready. And do we have any questions? Right up in the front here. Do we bring a mic down here? Let's do the mics, because it is a little bit of a cavernous room. Go ahead.
How long ago was Jay starting to look for work in the oil fields? and what has happened to him today
Yeah.
in terms of his work, or where is he employed?
Okay, and let me say, kind of as a bridge between what we were talking about in this question, Jay, after that long conversation, and with the blessing of his wife and his family, Jay came to the film's premiere at Sundance and was there for a week and participated in those screenings and audience conversations. And he's been a big part of the film's public life and will continue to be. And that's been very important for me, and I think it's been really valuable for him to see that there's been a lot of affirmation, and maybe it's fed his narcissism too. But no, it's been really important, and it's been important for me.
Healed him, no doubt.
For me, for me as a filmmaker, to be able, to know that he's standing behind the film. So Jay really started to look for. I mean, he was run out of the church in a very cruel way, I thought, and can't worship there. It's the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church, and it's intolerant of homosexuality, and certainly, they would just as soon forget the whole episode. So Jay has had a succession of jobs in Williston. He worked for FedEx for a while, stacking boxes in trucks, and he was fired from another job for telling the management what they were doing wrong. And he's now working for a company that provides oil pipe supplies, and he's pretty sad and frustrated. I mean, I think for a while it was a kind of a penance that he was doing this hard labor, and now he rightly feels like he has some talents as an educator that I think he would love to find a job that allowed him to really do what he does well.
When you, I don't want to say excavate, but when you, at the very least, bring to light stories like this, because there's, you see films like Capturing the Freedmens and things like that, where the stories there. This is public record in Williston and in the paper. You were reading the beginnings of this were stuff that was in the paper. Somebody didn't whisper this as gossip to you in a bar or something. And like with Capturing the Freedmens, the same thing. Do you find there's an unusual condition where you feel somewhat responsible for these people once you've put their life and their situation up on the screen? Do you feel some obligation to them?
Absolutely. I mean, Jay and I, we have a very close relationship, and it's not, I didn't do this because it was a job. No one paid me to go up there. I couldn't raise a fucking cent to make the movie, So I did it because I wanted to do it. And I made the movie about Jay because I like Jay. We disagree about many things, and we never talked politics because we knew we'd strangle each other. But, and I think he is he's a flawed, human being who's hurt people and a hypocrite. And I think he's also an extraordinarily brave person. And I he's a friend. So I couldn't make a movie about someone I didn't like. Somebody just asked me to make a movie about somebody, and I looked at him and I thought, I don't like that person, and I'm not going to do it. And so I feel, it's just, we went through a lot together. So.
Do we have this lady in the front here and down the left, right? And then we'll go back. We'll have time for a couple more. We were running behind.
My question was actually similar. Did you, without betraying any confidence of things you didn't put in the film, did you wrestle with certain ethical choices, and what were they?
Yes. I mean, this is, for me, I've made 2 other feature documentaries and then produced the film that Alec mentioned.
What were the other 2?
I made a film called Speedo, which I shot at Riverhead Raceway here on Long Island, that played at this film festival 10 years ago, which actually is about a man's marriage unraveling. And I face some challenging ethical questions in that film. It's about a demolition derby driver. And then I made a film about the U.S. Army's Iraq War training simulation. This film, and so I've faced some challenging ethical situations, both with kind of institutional and personal relationships and choices as a filmmaker, and this by far was in another league universe. I mean, I have, really the issue is, I think we've talked quite a bit about this, but, Jay's, it's what happens when, for a long time you can be making a film where your interests align. And then, particularly this kind of movie, or maybe a movie where you uncover something out of research or investigation that you know maybe was withheld from you, and what do you do with that material, and what impact does it have on the life or lives of your film subjects? And you know, there's no instruction manual, you know, and and I've, you know, when I think about defining my own ethical code as a filmmaker, I mean, the only thing I kind of rely on and fall back on as a filmmaker is, can my subject, will he or she stand with me and stand behind the film, even if they don't agree with everything in it? You know, have I, and that to me is kind of their, you know, certainly a complicated set of factors inform their decision to, you know, stand behind the film, but it's to me that kind of the true test of my own ethical conduct, you know. But I did face a scenario because Jay didn't decide to come to Sundance until the very night before the premiere, and because the decision was, you know, complicated for him and his family, and so I had to face this situation that I would be forced, that I would show the film without him, and that terrified me, and
You said Speedo, the guy got divorced from his wife?
yeah, his wife.
So if you and I made a film together, is my wife going to start acting weird toward me too? Is that what's going to happen?
We might have to get a haircut in Montana.
Well, that's, yeah. More on that later. This lady back here, right here.
Hi, I'm just curious how the town responded to your presence. I can't imagine there are too many people following a major public figure around with a camera, and what was that like for you?
Well, you know, there were a lot of cameras there, which freaked me out because I'm not used to, I'm not a news journalist. I don't cover big breaking stories, and I would run into, you know, camera crews, and I hated it, you know, and people, often they were like French TV crews, loved going to Williston, and they really annoyed me. But so there were, Williston, North Dakota's gotten a lot of coverage, you know, over the last 4 or 5 years, and there were crews there. Jay became, and when I met him, he was a nobody. You know, no one really gave a shit about the Overnighters program. It was just a kind of thorn in the side of a few people in the neighborhood, and it became a bigger story, and that became an issue for me, and I had to tell Jay, you know, you can't, we're making a film here, and you can't become a public figure. That's a problem for me as a filmmaker. You know, I think most people were like, why are you following, like, that's not a story about the oil field. That's, you know, most people were, it's the same story every day out of Williston, really. It's either strippers or, you know, actually it's changed, it's become a little darker. Initially the tone was very boosterish and optimistic, and like, that's kind of what sent me out there in the first place, was like, it can't be all this, you know, good news. And I didn't expect to find tragedy, but and I think there are people who did succeed who came through that program, but you know, most journalists were focused elsewhere, and for me that was an issue, because I did think, like, I came here to tell a story about the oil boom in North Dakota, and I'm in a church with a Lutheran pastor. I'm not sure anybody cares.
Well, a church with a Lutheran pastor who's attempting to, the tragedy to me is who's attempting to do what industry won't accomplish there, what the government won't accomplish there, not that they should be, but what the industry won't accomplish there. And he takes it upon himself to try to solve this social problem. And he gets his head chopped off because he turns out to be gay.
And the town has done nothing to help. There's no place to sleep in Williston if you have no place to sleep. After they closed the program, they convened a committee to discuss the problem. And as you can imagine, that resulted in nothing. And
I wonder what happened to the city once the Overnighters program ended, when more of those men were tossed out on the street.
I mean, you could, yeah. I mean, you could imagine. I mean, it's just, yeah. You know, and I think that it seemed to me part of the conversation that we should be having about how energy is transforming America. Domestic energy production is changing. But the industry itself and labor in that industry, because we talked a lot about environmental consequences, but labor, you know, and I think you feel it in Williston. It's like a voracious money-making machine, and people feel expendable.
Well, the true nature of what goes on in the world of fracking the reality about fracking. You know, the gas that's going to be realized, the trove of gas that's going to be realized, is not going to lower the cost of energy in this country. It's going to be transported by pipeline to facilities, LNG, and it's going to be shipped overseas on the market and sold to the highest bidder. If we thought we were going to have whatever level of environmental catastrophe here at home, whatever can be proven about the impact of fracking and its contaminations, that cost, I'm not quite sure that still would be worth bearing if all the gas stayed here and lowered the cost of energy. But no, it's being brought to market, and it's going to be sold, and it's not going to lower the cost of energy here. But we have time for two more. We did two. I'd like to go man, woman here, boy, girl. We'll do this gentleman here, and then we'll do one more. We are out of time.
I was wondering if the person who was blackmailing Jay, if that was in any way to force the issue of him, being forced out. Was that just personally trying to get money from a guy who's got no money? Or was this done as a deliberate ploy to further ruin his reputation and his desirability?
I think it was about money, yeah. I don't think it was, I'm not sure of all of the details, but I think it was just like, give me some money, I don't have any money, well then I'm going to send a letter to the church leadership, and that's it for you.
The lady right there in the very back, yes. We'll do one more because it is after 10.
Hi. I wanted to know about that woman with the gun, if she hit you.
What about her?
Did she hit you?
Oh, she hit me, yeah.
gun? Oh, okay.
Yeah, on the back with a metal broomstick. It's funny because, you're running this kind of like complex calculation of like, well, he's a pastor, so he's a man of the cloth, and surely he'll have divine protection from the gun-wielding crazy woman. But does that cover me or not?
Well, what I was curious about was, as she hit you, and was it a broom handle?
Yeah.
And then she went and retreated around the car. Did I notice that you ever so slightly tilted down to try to get a shot of her butt crack coming out of her pants?
Yeah, you got that.
I saw a vague little tilt down like that.
No,
that's cinematic justice.
I didn't
right
get
there.
a release, but she can come after me.
She can come after you.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
One more quick one.
It's
quick.
my
The lady right there in
revenge.
in the red sweater, fuchsia sweater.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question about, like, for the director. I have two. One is relatable to the last question. Were you ever frightened whenever Jay was going, like, anywhere that you didn't feel safe? Because it seemed that he was really ambitious to go all these places searching for people. And also, would you say, like, this movie is kind of about, like, Jay it's not like a slow descent into madness, like insanity, but like failure, basically?
I'm okay. Well, I guess first of all, the program and the men, many of whom had criminal records, always felt like the safest place to me, and that's why I liked being there. And I think, the men there never threatened me. Sometimes they wanted to talk too much, and I wanted to go to sleep or something. But Williston, when I first arrived, it freaked me out, and it felt, and really is a very destabilized place. I mean, it's been ripped apart from the inside. The scale of growth is astonishing. It's gone from 15,000 to probably 50,000 in about 4 or 5 years, and the whole community has really been ripped apart, and there's people, there's just, it feels, and that's why I included the scene with the seagull. There's a kind of lurking violence that I felt. I got over that actually, and didn't feel quite as freaked out as I did in the first 3 or 4 months. But no, the only real scary time was with that woman. But I think Jay is a tragic. I think Jay's a tragic hero. I think that his flaw is what gives him compassion, and it's what destroys him. And that's what makes him who he is, and what gives that film its shape, and his journey that shape. And I think that I didn't set out to find men who wouldn't succeed. I wanted winners. That's why I picked Keegan, the big handsome boy from Wisconsin with the Buddy Holly glasses. I thought, this guy's going to make it. So I desperately wanted one of these guys to make it.
I want to just say, and I neglected to say this last time we were here, and I do want to say it, and I feel slightly odd saying this, but I think it's valid nonetheless, that if you enjoyed this film, please take to whatever social media, that could be the telephone, by the way, to someone directly calling them on the phone, to whatever social media you have, whether it's Facebook or Twitter and things. Now, Life Itself, the Roger Ebert film, that's been released already.
Correct.
The Clark Terry film, is that coming out?
That is coming out sometime in the next 6 weeks, I think.
So the Clark
yeah.
Terry film,
Keep on Keeping On.
And then Rory Kennedy's film is on PBS.
Correct, and it also releases theatrically, I think, in September as well.
And this film will be released.
October 10th at the IFC Center in New York City.
There you go. Please, one of the things, this is our last film in the series this summer. I want to say to my pal here, David Nugent, thank you so much. I love these films and I love doing this program.
Likewise.
And I want to say thank you to our guests for coming, because we don't have this program unless these people make great films that we want to show. And please tell your friends about those films. Keep on Keeping On, Last Days in Vietnam, and especially this film, The Overnighters. Please, if you enjoyed this film, please pass on the word. And thank you all very much for coming.
And please vote for our audience award on the way out, too. Thank you, everybody.